Pet skinks have become a staple in the reptile world. Everybody wants one. They come in all different shapes, sizes, and colours. But by far the most popular pet skink out there is the blue tongue skink. In fact, my first pet reptile was an Irian blue tongue skink, and I had her for many years. She was by far the friendliest and most interactive pet reptile that I have ever had. Recently, I've been really missing having a pet skink in the family, but there was one problem. Blue tongue skinks are huge, and they take up a lot of space. The recommended enclosure size for them now is a 6x2x2, and I just don't have the space for that right now. And not many people out there have space for a 6-foot enclosure in their house, so I decided to go on the hunt for the next best pet skink. Stay tuned to see which skink I bring home and how I set up their enclosure. Now let's get right into the video. The first skink I looked into were the emerald tree skinks. These have become really popular recently, and for good reason. They're absolutely beautiful with those bright green colours, and they're full of personality and character. It's not uncommon to see videos of these skinks running up people's arms or jumping around their enclosure to catch bugs. Emerald tree skinks are native to Southeast Asia, and they occupy humid tropical forests. They'll spend their days climbing up and down trees, and they live communally. Their max size is about 9 inches long, so they are significantly smaller than blue tongue skinks. Their arboreal nature means that their enclosure would need to be taller rather than longer, which is exactly what I have space for. But ultimately, I decided against an emerald tree skink, as I wanted an animal that I could hang out with on the couch, and I think that this species is just a bit too small for that. So I continued my hunt for the best pet skink, and one species that I absolutely fell in love with in Australia was the shingleback skink. Shinglebacks are actually within the same genus as the blue tongue skink, but because they're missing that tail, instead of getting 24 inches long, they max out at about 12 to 18. They're known for being monogamous, which means that they partner up for life. And they're typically docile in nature, just like the blue tongue skink. Shinglebacks are a terrestrial species which can be found in a variety of habitats all over Australia. When I attended an Aussie Expo, these guys were everywhere, and they were super cheap. So when I came back to the UK, I had my heart set on a shingleback, looked up the price, and that's when I found out that they're not so cheap here. I called it quits on that idea and went back to researching different skink species. I was a bit disappointed because I love Australian reptiles. I've got Tim Tam the barking gecko and Bicky the Woma python, so I was really hoping to add another Aussie animal to the family. And that's when I stumbled across the pink tongue skink. This species was perfect for me because they had the look of a blue tongue, but they love to climb like the emerald tree skink. And like the shingleback, they only max out at about 18 inches, so they're the perfect size to hang out with in the reptile room. I decided that this was the pet for me, so I did as much research as I possibly could. And before I brought home my new pet pink tongue skink, I of course had to set up the enclosure. So let's make the perfect tropical habitat for my new pet. This is the enclosure that I chose for my pink tongue skink. It's 4 foot long, 3 foot high, and 2 foot deep. Because this species likes to climb, I have installed a custom background. But this background is looking pretty shabby now. Let's spruce it up a bit. I started by taking off the old layer of expanding foam and cocoa fiber, and I knew I wanted to add a plant pot into the background of this, so I flipped the enclosure on its back, placed the plant pot in, and covered it in expanding foam. I let this cure for 24 hours before carving away that top layer of expanding foam and starting to silicone. I opted for brown silicone for this setup just in case any of that cocoa fiber fell away and left any bald patches. Whilst the silicone was still wet, I started to place the dry cocoa fiber on top of it, and then I let it cure for 24 hours before tipping it up. The background was looking a whole lot better now, but before we could plant it, I had to install the heating and lighting. Pink Tongue Skinks need a basking spot of about 35 degrees, so I used an 100-watt eco halogen and connected it to a thermostat. They also need to bask underneath UVB to keep their bones nice and healthy, so I installed a 6% UVB unit. I also added an LED bar for plant growth, but my True Chroma lamp will also help with plant growth too. But the main benefit that I like from the True Chroma lamp is the UVA one. All my lighting elements are on a smart timer which I can control through my phone, and they're set to be on for 12 hours and off for 12 hours. Now we can finally set everything up, so let's see what ProRep has sent me to bring this enclosure to life. First up, we've got 2 bags of BioLife forest substrate, which will be perfect for my live plants. Every bioactive enclosure needs leaf litter too, as it acts as a food source for the cleanup crew, and it helps maintain humidity within the substrate. Speaking of humidity, they supplied me with a humid hide. These are crucial for avoiding stuck shed. I like to fill my humid hides with moss, so ProRep sent me some of their forest moss. Reptiles obviously need access to drinking water too, and this large shallow drinking bowl will be perfect for my juvenile pink tongue. And the last product is already in the setup, but it's the ProRep T5 UVB unit. This is the 24-watt version, and it fits any standard T5 bulb. A huge thanks to the ProRep team for supplying me with these products. Now let's set the enclosure up. I started by cutting my drainage layer to size and then placing it within the enclosure. I'm using filter sponge as it's lightweight and dig proof. I then began prepping the plants by removing any excess soil. Some stores use fertilizer, so this is a very important step, as is rinsing away any leftover soil on the roots. Now we can add the BioLife substrate. I added 2 bags straight into the enclosure, but I felt like the substrate needed bulking up a bit because the enclosure is so large. So I grabbed my organic Westlands topsoil and added about half a bag. I also mixed in some moss and leaf litter to keep the substrate nice and fluffy and light and avoid it becoming hydrophobic. Then using my other bags of leaf litter, I capped off the surface with a nice thick layer. The final step before adding plants was to pop some sphagnum moss and substrate into the background so it was ready for its pothos. I chose this plant because it grows very quickly and it vines off, and I'm hoping that it will cover the background and create lots of hiding places. I then added 2 different types of Calathea, which is notoriously hard to keep alive, but I guess I'm getting a bit too big for my boots, guys, because I really thought I could do it. I especially love this one that goes into the center as it's got pink on its leaves, and I love pink. This setup also needed an umbrella plant, but the only space I could find for it was near the heat lamp, so it may get scorched over time. I'll just keep an eye on it. You'll see in a bit though that this inch plant is thriving. It has essentially taken over the entire enclosure. Same goes for this Photonia, but I did end up taking the bromeliads out. That's all the plants sorted, now it's time for the cleanup crew. I've chosen giant orange isopods as they do tend to eat shed more, and because this is bioactive for a skink, I think it will definitely come in handy. I also added in some springtails to help break down mold. Next on the agenda is hides and hardscape, so I'm placing in the humid hide first. I put this in a hidden spot so that they can feel nice and safe while shedding. I've got these 2 hides as well, which will act as my warm and cool side hides. This species is semi-arboreal, so they might not use these hides, but at least they're there if they want them. I then added the water bowl and started to choose where I wanted my cork tubes and tunnels to go. This is the one thing that was highly recommended to me when I was researching this species, as cork is an easy surface to climb on and hide within. I wanted to make them a bit more accessible though, so I did so by adding in these large branches to climb on. They're perfect for basking on too. Here's how the setup was looking a month later. The plants have grown in tremendously, and I think that this setup is now ready for its inhabitant. I was searching for a pink tongue skink for months, and I just couldn't find the one for me. At one point I was about to bring a rescue home, but that fell through. But luckily the IHS Reptile Expo was coming up, and I knew that this would be a fantastic opportunity for me to try and find one. But yeah, I've got my fingers crossed for 2 different animals today. I may come home with nothing. We'll see. We'll just have to see if I can find them. The morning of the expo, I received a text from my fellow content creator letting me know that there was a stall with loads of pink tongue skinks, and I was ecstatic. So after a good chat with the breeder and looking at all my options, I purchased Peach the pink tongue skink. Peach is an 18-month-old reduced pattern pink tongue skink, and she is het for patternless as well, but I don't have any plans to breed her. I got her from a fantastic breeder called Herp Exotics, so a huge shout out and a thank you to them. Going into a new home can be pretty stressful for a reptile, so I left her alone for a few days before giving her her first meal. Pink tongues, like their distant cousins, the blue tongue skink, love snails, so a month prior to bringing her home, I had set up a snail army. I started by adding lots of deep substrate so the snails could lay their eggs. And I added a hide and some climbing opportunities for the snails in case they wanted them. Then I gave the enclosure a good spray down and added in their food bowl. Some springtails will help keep this clean for me too. Last but not least, I added in the veg and then the snails themselves. It didn't take long for the snails to settle in and start having some babies, so now I had a good stable food source for my skink. Using my feeding tongs, I popped a snail into her enclosure and it took no time at all for her to go after it. It's always an amazing feeling when your new pet reptile eats straight away. Since she's a juvenile, she's been getting small meals every day, so she's been going through these snails fast. But as she gets older, she'll need to eat less frequently, so the snail population won't be declining as much. Peach had now been eating consistently for a whole week, so I decided it was time to have our first handling session. I went in very slowly and gently and scooped her up with my hands. And she was fantastic, she just sat there. Our bond will only grow as time goes on, and I'm so excited to see her come out of her shell a little bit more. If you'd like to see future updates on Peach, then make sure you do subscribe and comment down below what your pet reptiles are called. I really hope you enjoyed this video and stay tuned to see what other new additions will be joining the reptile room. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.